What are good research questions for empirical research in educational leadership? Every year, I teach a course that introduces leadership theories to doctoral students and help them develop theoretical frameworks and research questions. In this video, I talk about 5 criteria that you can use to develop and evaluate good research questions. These 5 criteria are for the field of educational leadership and leadership in general. They may not apply to other fields. These 5 criteria are the ones that I use personally, so not everyone agrees with me. To share your thoughts about research questions, please leave your comments below. Number 1. Don't ask research questions that can be answered by reviewing literature. This criterion is for empirical research, not for the research that uses existing literature such as meta-analysis or systematic review. In empirical research, your research questions comes from theories and literature review. For example, literature has consistently suggested the positive correlation between organizational culture and organizational performance. If your research question is about the relationship between these two constructs, you need a compelling argument to justify why this relationship needs to be re-examined and how your research fills the void that previous researchers have missed. Sometimes the relationship between two constructs can be derived from their theoretical definitions. In this case, one more empirical study to examine their relationship does not add value to the knowledge base of the field. For example, leader-member exchange refers to mutual respect, trust, and loyalty. It demonstrates the quality of relationships developed by leaders with their followers. It can be measured by the survey questions such as, how well do you feel that your immediate supervisor understands your problems and needs? To what extent do you have enough confidence in your immediate supervisor that you would defend and justify his or her decisions if he or she were not present to do so? Existing literature has suggested that leader-member exchange is predictive of work performance. Since trust is a dimension of the construct of leader-member exchange, it implies there is a positive relationship between leader-member exchange and trust. If you ask a research question to test the relationship between the two constructs, the results do not add much value to what we've already known unless you have a compelling justification. Another example is to ask research questions about the relationship between transformational leadership and employee motivation. If you look into the theoretical definition of transformational leadership, you will find 4 dimensions of transformational leadership: idealized influence, which is also called charisma, inspirational motivation, intellectual stimulation, and individualized consideration. Among them, inspirational motivation is directly related to motivation, and the other 3 dimensions are also about motivating employees. In addition to established relationship in theoretical definitions, there has been consistent empirical evidence supporting this relationship between transformational leadership and employee motivation. In this case, if you still ask research questions to investigate the relationship between transformational leadership and employee motivation, you'll need to develop a compelling argument to justify why we need one more study to validate the knowledge we've already known. Criteria number 2, stay away from program evaluation, but focus on the leadership process. Many of my doctoral students tend to ask research questions to evaluate a program that has been implemented or will be implemented in their organizations. Every year, there are many programs become popular, including but not limited to project-based learning, social-emotional learning, trauma-informed teaching, culturally responsive pedagogy, mindfulness, and growth mindset. In education, we have a pro-innovation bias. Keeping up with the trends in education is like drinking from a fire hose. I discussed this pro-innovation bias in a different video. If you are interested, you can watch it by following the link I put in the description below. Back to the research questions. Here is an example of a set of research questions a doctoral student proposed. What are teachers' perceptions of Program X? What are school principals' perceptions of Program X? What are district administrators' perceptions of Program X? And what are parents and community members' perception of Program X? This type of research questions are very common among students who propose research questions for the first time. What are the problems with these questions? First, they're not driven by theories. I will discuss this issue in detail in a minute. Second, it's about program evaluation. In leadership research, your focus is not on a specific program because Program X can be replaced by Program Y. Your focus is on the leadership process in the context of a program. What was the role of leaders in the implementation process of Program X? How did the leaders interact with organizational members to motivate them to implement the program? How did the leaders grapple with the conflict when their personal goals of advancing their career as fast as possible clash with the organizational goal of advancing the greater good of the community the organization serves? Here is another example of a research question. Does Program X enhance organizational outcomes, for example, student achievement? What's wrong with this research question? The fact that your organization implements Program X already implies that administrators assume the program is effective and brings benefits to the organizational outcomes. The administrator's decision of adopting the program may be evidence-based or may be driven by some leaders' self-serving interest. Either way, just because evidence says Program X enhances student achievement does not necessarily mean Program X enhances student achievement in your organization. An analogy is that evidence says an apple a day keeps the doctors away. It does not mean that any apple makes you healthy. An organic apple may keep you healthy. A rotten apple does not. An apple full of pesticide does not keep you healthy either. This is what leaders call implement a program with fidelity. Again, in leadership research, your focus is not on a specific program, but the leadership process in the context of implementing the program. Criterion number 3, place leadership in a context. Don't conceptualize it as a static, isolated entity. Leadership goes beyond characteristics, traits, and experiences that leaders possess. This view of leadership assumes that leaders' traits are static and isolated across time and places. This assumption does not hold because people's intelligence, virtues, skills, and characteristics are subject to the context. People can be intelligent in things they are interested in. People can be empathetic, passionate to the people they care about, but turn a blind eye to the sufferings of the homeless. People can be manipulative at work, but altruistic and eager to help strangers. People can be virtuous, deferential to their superiors, but verbally and physically abusive to their subordinates. Leaders can be effective in one organization but ineffective in another. How leaders behave is subject to their context. Whether they have an aggressive board or a deferential board, To what extent budget poses as a constraint, how much the organization's goals fit the goal of the surrounding neighborhood, and whether policy changes give leaders more discretion. I am not diminishing the importance of great leaders' individual contribution to their influence. But we cannot view leaders as individuals think and behave in isolation. Instead, we should view leaders as part of a group process in which leaders and followers see each other as part of shared effort. We should broaden our scope, which casts a spotlight narrowly on isolated heroes. We need to pay more attention to leaders' relationship with those who translate leaders' vision and ideas into action and results. Why did Churchill succeed in the war but lose in the peace? It is less about Churchill's traits and characteristics, but more about the context in which Churchill's influence or the lack thereof was shaped by the social context. Abraham Lincoln's life stories are inspiring. How he won the nomination of the newly funded Republican Party's first presidential candidate in 1860 is fascinating. For a very long time, while Lincoln stated that slaves had the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, he also stated that he had no purpose to introduce political and social equality between the white and the black races. In a debate in 1858, Lincoln said he had never been in favor of making voters or jurors of Negroes, nor of qualifying them to hold office, nor to intermarry. He acknowledged a physical difference between the two that would probably forever forbid their living together upon the footing of perfect equality. Let's have a thought experiment, putting Lincoln in today's context. It is the same Lincoln with the same traits, characteristics, and experiences. Would Lincoln's vision resonate with the people today? Would he still emerge as a great president? Leadership is as much an outcome of the context as it is a determinant of it. Criterion number 4. Don't be trapped in the waiting for Superman mindset. Pay attention to the interaction between leaders and the people around them. In 2010, there was a documentary about public education in the United States. The title of the documentary is Waiting for Superman. In fact, many people tend to view leadership from a heroic Superman or Superwoman perspective. The Alexander the Great conquered India when he was 30 years old, but did he fight the battle alone? The victory of the World War II has been attributed primarily to a few leaders who have been described as the saviors of the entire world. In fact, the victory should also be attributed to 75 million people who died in the war, the people who were injured, and countless people who fought for the victory. When you walk into an organization building, do you see glorified portraits of leaders on the wall? Do people describe those leaders as being decisive, insightful, intelligent, and charismatic? The view that only those with extraordinary skills and traits are capable of assuming high office is pernicious. It implies that leadership is for the elite, for the well-educated, and for the well-trained. It discourages people from challenging the legitimacy of leaders' authority. The heroic view of leadership implies that leadership is a noun, whether you possess them or not. This view has become so entrenched that leaders' pictures, portraits, statues, and life experiences project an image of godlike superiority that justify their fitness to lead. This view, of course, serves those who occupy leadership positions, and they are happy to endorse such a view. Leaders are not a special breed of human beings who are superior to others. Even though leaders believe they are special, they are extraordinary, and they deserve exorbitant status, salary, and bonuses. This kind of belief is an illusion. The term superiority illusion specifically describes our tendency to perceive ourselves as being superior to average human beings. We all have superiority illusion, but leaders appear to be particularly vulnerable to it. I'll talk about how the feeling of power contributes to superiority illusion in a different video. We should not endorse a simplified, individualistic, heroic understanding of leadership, which focuses on their upbringings, the key events in their life, their psychological characteristics, personality traits, and what makes them special. Instead, we need to extend our scope beyond leaders alone. Instead of focusing on leaders' individuality, we should pay more attention to how leaders' individuality functions or the lack thereof in a team which is made up multiple team members with their own unique individualities. In other words, avoiding asking questions, where are the Superman or Superwoman who are saviors bringing the organization out of chaos and darkness? Instead, pay attention to the interaction between leaders and the people around them and take into account the context they are in. Criterion number 5, advanced theory development of educational leadership. Over the last 2 decades, how many theoretical constructs have been used in empirical research in educational leadership? Almost 500. To find this answer, I counted the theoretical constructs in the empirical studies published in 4 leading research journals in educational leadership. I then built an interconnected network in which one construct has some relationship with another. In the network you see on the screen, each dot represents a theoretical construct. If 2 constructs were studied in the same empirical article in educational leadership, then there is a tie connecting the 2 constructs. Over the last 2 decades, from 1999 to 2018, a total of 483 theories or theoretical constructs had been used to theoretically frame empirical studies in educational leadership. Sometimes the students really like some constructs and then develop an empirical study to examine how those constructs work together to influence an outcome construct. The theoretical framework for such a study is something like what you see on the screen. There are 4 constructs. They can be school climate, trust, collective efficacy, and organizational justice. And each of these 4 constructs contributes to an outcome construct such as student achievement. Good scholars not only examine the relationship between construct 1, 2, 3, 4 and outcome construct separately, but also investigate whether the constructs 1, 2, 3, 4 interact and whether there is a trade-off among them. To advance the theory development in educational leadership, we need to pay attention to whether there are redundant theoretical constructs and whether we have competing theories. If yes, how to use empirical studies to refine those 500 theoretical constructs we've already used in the field over the past 20 years. If the existing literature and theoretical definitions of constructs have already suggested some sort of connections or relationships between the construct of your interest, then how to ask good research questions that do not do patchwork that adds piecemeal to what we've already known, but to create a breakthrough in how we think about and practice leadership. Of course, groundbreaking breakthrough is a rare event in any scientific field, such as the breakthrough in our understanding that the Earth is not the center of the universe, but the sun is. It is not easy to ask good questions that lead to a breakthrough in how we think and practice leadership, but we strive for it. Let me borrow what JFK said. We choose to do it not because it is easy, but because it is hard, and because it serves to the field we are devoted to. In this video, I talk about 5 criteria I use to develop research questions for empirical research in educational leadership. They are: number 1, don't ask questions that can be answered by reviewing literature. Number 2, stay away from program evaluation, focus on the leadership process. Number 3, place leadership in a context. Don't conceptualize it as a static, isolated entity. Number 4, don't be trapped in the waiting for Superman mindset. Pay attention to the interaction between leaders and their followers. Number 5, advance theory development of educational leadership. What are your thoughts about how to develop good research questions? Please leave your comments below. I'll see you next time.